Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and our continuing series on the Sega Saturn, and today we're taking a look at Virtua Fighter 2, which is one of the better fighting games on the Saturn as far as 3D is concerned. Now, while this game may be a huge downgrade from the Model 2 arcade original, as far as 3D fighting games on the Saturn is concerned, it's actually quite an accomplishment. If you've ever played the original Virtua Fighter on the Saturn, it was a quick port from the arcades, and that game was basically torn apart for just being a bare bones port with some terrible graphics. When we come over to Virtua Fighter 2 on the Saturn, it's playing in the Saturn's high resolution mode, everything's functioning at a perfect 60 frames a second, the gameplay is fluid, and even if it has a lot of graphical downgrades compared to the arcade original, it plays exactly the same, and you're either going to love that or you're going to hate that, because Virtua Fighter plays unlike any other 3D fighting game franchise that's been made. The controls are floaty, your characters jump and they feel like they're on the moon. It definitely has its own style and its own feel of the combat that you either absolutely love or absolutely hate. There doesn't seem to be any middle road with Virtua Fighter. You either love it or you think it's absolute garbage. I'm of the camp that thinks these games are amazing. I love all 5 entries in the franchise and I play them pretty much consistently, at least a couple times a year. Soundtrack is also awesome on this, and it's definitely a dirt cheap game. I'm playing a Japanese copy. You can still pick them up for $5 if you just kind of bide your time, pay $10 for it if you really don't want to wait. But the soundtrack's awesome, the gameplay's awesome, it's classic Virtua Fighter on your Saturn, and it is so much better than the original entry, because even the original Virtua Fighter in arcades, it's a good game, but it definitely has aged pretty poorly, and it's not one that I go back to and play that much. But Virtua Fighter 2, 3, 4, and 5 I definitely play all the time, and 2 is going to be an awesome experience on the Saturn. You do get a little bit of graphical glitching. There's kind of that like infinite plane thing going on, and some of the 3D floors just kind of seem to go to infinity in weird ways, but really we can forgive a lot of that because it's just an awesome game to play. It has a certain control style and a certain feel that's just unlike anything else, and I really gravitate towards that because it's as much a strategic fighting game as it is just a standard fighting game, and just some things are so different that if you get used to them, everything feels so fluid. Like you see when we jump here, nobody jumps like that. You float through the air, you go about 50 feet in front of you. It makes no logical sense, but it feels really good, because I was never a huge fan of Tekken when it came out. It was a fun game and I enjoyed it, but it moved so quickly and it felt more like a button masher to me personally compared to Virtua Fighter. I always gravitated towards this game. And we're doing an entire playthrough of Sarah versus showing you all the different types of characters you can play as. I just wanted to focus on one for a full gameplay, but there's enough of a roster that you're definitely going to be able to enjoy it. But as far as what type of port is it, it's basically a straight port. It's not really adding anything from the arcade that you'll be getting at home. So it's definitely a quick experience from start to finish. If you're good at it, you can beat the game in about 10 minutes, and it's really not going to have much more to offer unless you start playing against your friends. But that's why it's great, because it's just so dirt cheap. Because some of the games I've been showing on this series so far are pretty expensive, especially if you get a North American copy, but some of the games I want to show can be had for a $10 bill, and you're definitely going to get your money's worth there. I do love how Pi's little hair clip falls out. You get just enough of those like little visual flair moments. You can definitely tell Sega put a lot of work into this. How the hair moves, it looks more natural than you'd expect to get out of something like the Sega Saturn hardware. And that's one of the great things about how this game functions using that high resolution mode. Everything looks really nicely, even if they did have to compress the backgrounds down into these 2D background layers versus having more 3D like the arcade original. But if you enjoy fighting games and you haven't played Virtua Fighter 2, I'd kind of ask how can you have avoided it for that long. But if you have a Saturn and you haven't picked this game up yet, it's an awesome game to pick up for a $10 bill, especially if you have friends over, crack a couple beers. You're going to have a great time with it. There's some weird freezing in between the rounds. It kind of just has to reload things, so there's a little bit of a stutter there, but everything moves pretty quickly, and for a system that was not known to have great 3D games, this game to me looks as good as something that you could have pulled off on the PlayStation 1. And that's just down to how good Sega was at coding for the system when they got better at it. But go ahead and watch the next match from start to finish, and I'll come back and talk more about Virtua Fighter in a bit.
Two. Ready, go! One. Ready, go!
So the real question to me is, why haven't we gotten a Virtua Fighter 6 yet? Because this is one of Sega's biggest franchise, and we've gotten 5 entries in the series with a lot of different revisions of each game. Yet for some reason, Sega just insists on not giving us Virtua Fighter 6, and I really wish they would, because it's a franchise I miss. And the most recent revision of 5 is only playable in a Yakuza game, which is really strange. I appreciate that they added it in there, but can't they just make a physical copy for Xbox One or PlayStation 4 or even the Switch and just sell it to me? Because I'd love to have it on my shelf, but that's kind of a little bit of an aside, because the Virtua Fighter franchise has been around for a very long time, but we don't get that many releases in it. And as far as value for your money is concerned, they're all great games, and 2 is a really amazing game. And like I said, showing different games on the Saturn at different price points, I wanted to be able to have at least a couple games in this series that wasn't just, oh, play them if you have gigantically deep pockets and don't care about blowing a lot of money. Let me show you a couple games you can actually still get on the cheap and enjoy, and they're some of the best games in the Saturn's library. And that's why I particularly like Virtua Fighter 2, because it can just be had that cheaply, and it's a really fun arcade fighter, and if you get friends together, you're going to have a great time. Now on the downsides, and I definitely like to talk about what isn't great about games, is I do wish that they had done a little bit more for the backgrounds to bring a little bit more 3D in. I understand the Saturn definitely wasn't a Model 2. They weren't even the same architecture for the most part. They were leaps and bounds apart from how powerful each one was. And while I do appreciate that the character models are, high polygon count, high res, the backgrounds just don't look great to me. When you get to Virtua Fighter 3 on the Dreamcast, they kept the same Model 3 backgrounds, diminished the quality a little bit, but still kept most things going on. I also just wish that they had kind of given us more to do in the game. It really is just a bare bones arcade release. And if you play it on one player mode, you can be done with it in 10 minutes if you play well, and then you're kind of wondering, should I play again, or should I just put it away and come back to it in another year? But that's pretty much every fighting game. But when you get into these fighting games that don't have any online component, like games on the PlayStation 1 or the Saturn, you have to judge them, based on how much enjoyment you can get out of them without being able to connect online. And that's just the reality of games that are this old, is they can be limited experiences. And I do like there, we almost were beaten by Akira, but if you time your strikes correctly, if you kind of, gauge what your opponent's going to do, you can go from being one hit away from a loss to completely destroying your opponent that quickly. And I do appreciate that about Virtua Fighter, as it kind of feels like a more 3D version of the SNK Samurai Showdown games. Granted, there's no weapons, but you do have to think, and you do need to be a little bit more methodical about what you do, because you can see there I take my first loss of the playthrough. And I am playing this on default difficulty, and it is quite fair. If you turn the difficulty up, it can be a real challenge to be able to get to the end of the game, but I like that because sometimes I really do want that challenge, and I want to have to sit there and fight over and over again to be able to move forward. And I will say, as far as 3D fighting franchises are concerned, I think I'm the best at Virtua Fighter of any of them, but I'm not amazing at any fighting game. I really enjoy them, I like playing them. I can sometimes be competitive online, depending on the game, but I'm not great at them. But I super enjoy Virtua Fighter 2, and I definitely recommend you pick it up. And now you'll see as we're getting towards the end, we're fighting Doral there, underneath the water, and the game just changes the physics completely and does all sorts of strange things with it. It's just kind of a little fun underwater stage. You can see that background layers kind of warping back and forth as an effect to kind of show you what it looks like underwater. But short of that, that is Virtua Fighter 2, an awesome game on the Saturn, a great fighting game, and you can have it for extremely cheap. And that's kind of hard to say about Saturn games now, because the market in the last year to 18 months has just completely exploded, and things are going up in value to an insane degree, to the point where I would not buy them at this point in time. But the good thing is, Virtua Fighter is one of those games that you can. But short of that, we really appreciate you guys watching this. If you could do us a huge favor, go down below and hit like and subscribe. It takes us a lot of time and energy to make each one of these episodes, and we really appreciate all your support. We will be back next Tuesday with another episode in our Sega Saturn series, and we will also have videos on Friday and Sunday as well on other topics. But we do still have a lot more fun Saturn stuff to talk about moving forward, so stay tuned for that. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. I'm happy to answer each and every one of them. Otherwise, we hope you enjoy the rest of this fight, and we hope you guys have a good rest of your week. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Even good guys blow it.